All right, so let's dive into something that's well, I guess you could say it's always in the headlines.
Always seems to be.
Yeah, it really does. Abortion rights in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to try and, I guess, untangle this, sort of the legal knots around it, explore the heart of the arguments, and try to figure out where things stand now, especially after Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's a sensitive topic, but we're going to be objective here and just try and lay out all the different perspectives.
Yeah, and look at it from all angles and really try and give a clear view of a very complicated landscape.
Yeah, definitely complicated. And, you know, it's interesting because we kind of have like these hazy beginnings to abortion rights, right?
Yeah.
It's not explicitly stated in the Constitution, this right to privacy that sort of forms the basis for it.
Right. It's not spelled out in the Constitution, which is interesting.
It is.
The Supreme Court in 1965 with Griswold versus Connecticut, they kind of constructed this right from penumbras formed by emanations of other fundamental rights.
Penumbras formed by emanations. That sounds more like a riddle than a legal concept.
It does.
So no wonder people have been debating it, right?
Yeah.
But what was Justice Douglas even trying to say with that metaphor?
Well, he argued that specific guarantees that are in the Bill of Rights, like the First Amendment's protection of free association or the Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, he argued that those create zones of privacy.
Okay.
And those are the penumbras, even though the word privacy itself is never mentioned. So it's kind of like these rights cast shadows, you know, and within those shadows are other rights, like the right to privacy.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So instead of like a direct declaration, the court was sort of like piecing together this right to privacy from these like implied protections.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it. I see how that leads to a lot of different interpretations.
Exactly. And this whole interpretation, even though it's really innovative, it's been criticized a lot because it's maybe overly expansive and doesn't have a clear foundation in the text of the Constitution. It really gets to the heart of the debate about the role of the judiciary. Are they there just to interpret the law as it's written, or do they also have a role in shaping like societal values through their rulings?
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And that foundation of, well, penumbras and emanations is what led to Roe v. Wade, right? That was 1973. That's where things really got interesting.
Absolutely. That's the big one.
Yeah. So Roe v. Wade took that right to privacy from Griswold and extended it to include a woman's right to choose to have an abortion.
That's right.
So the court was basically arguing that a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, including those about reproduction, that all fell under that umbrella of privacy.
Yeah, precisely.
Yep.
And, you know, it was this connection to privacy, which, again, is never explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, that really ignited a firestorm, a controversy. Still going on today. The court, I mean, they were trying to navigate this really complex issue, and they created that trimester framework to try and balance a woman's right to privacy with the state's interest in protecting potential life.
Yeah, that framework is really important to understanding how Roe v. Wade worked. So remind us how it worked.
Okay, so in the first trimester of pregnancy, the court ruled that any decision about having an abortion should be left to the woman and her doctor.
Okay.
But in the second trimester, the state could step in and regulate abortion, but only in ways that were reasonably related to the mother's health.
Okay.
And then in the third trimester, after fetal viability, the state could then prohibit abortion unless the mother's life or health were at risk.
So it wasn't like an absolute unrestricted right to an abortion.
Right.
Okay, so the court was setting some boundaries.
Yes.
Okay, I get it. But Roe v. Wade did not settle the debate, did it?
Nope.
It feels like it made things even more intense, you know?
It really did. It ignited these huge legal challenges and political backlash, and states were constantly looking for ways to restrict abortion, even with this federal ruling.
So even though it's federal, it didn't override the states completely.
It didn't. It created this ongoing power struggle. So Roe v. Wade kind of tipped the scales towards federal power on abortion because it made it a constitutional right and then limited what states could do. But that tension was always there, right? Between the states and the feds. And it's part of what led to Roe v. Wade being overturned in 2022 with Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health.
And that's where we are now, right?
Yeah.
It all goes back to the states, and we have this patchwork of laws across the country.
Exactly.
But before we even get into that, there's that really big question that's at the heart of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Does privacy really include the right to abortion?
That is the question, isn't it? The legal debate really hinges on how you interpret privacy and how it's applied. If it's about individual autonomy and control over one's body, does that include terminating a pregnancy?
Right. And that's closely tied to another really difficult question.
Mm-hmm.
When does life begin? Is it at conception? At viability?
Right.
Somewhere in between? That answer has huge implications for both sides.
It does. And the pro-life perspective argues that life begins at conception, right? And that abortion is therefore taking a human life. Pro-choice emphasizes a woman's right to bodily autonomy and being able to control her own reproductive decisions.
Right.
So, where you fall on these issues really depends on your beliefs, how you interpret the scientific evidence, and even your views about the role of government in personal decisions.
That's a lot. Legal interpretations, ethical considerations, deeply held beliefs. It's a lot. But let's try to break it down a bit.
Okay.
What are those core arguments from pro-life and pro-choice? And how have they shaped this whole debate?
Okay, well, let's start with the pro-life perspective. The core belief there is that life begins at conception and that abortion is morally equivalent to taking a human life.
Okay, so from the moment of fertilization, that fertilized egg is considered a human being.
Yeah, with a right to life that needs to be protected.
Okay.
Pro-life advocates will often point to scientific evidence to support that.
Okay.
Like fetal heartbeat, brain activity, even the potential for pain perception.
Okay.
They believe that developing fetus has inherent value and deserves the same protection as any other human being.
So for them, that right to life outweighs a woman's right to choose.
Yeah, it becomes a matter of protecting the most vulnerable among us, those who can't speak for themselves.
Right.
And they also often express concern about the potential psychological effects of abortion on women, suggesting that it can lead to regret, guilt, and some mental health issues.
That's a good point. It's more than just the legal arguments. It's about deeply personal beliefs and experiences.
It is. It really is. Now, on the other side, you have the pro-choice perspective,
right,
which prioritizes a woman's right to bodily autonomy.
So for them, it's a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, her reproductive health, including the right to choose to have an abortion without the government interfering.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
They would argue that forcing a woman to carry an unwanted pregnancy to term violates her fundamental rights.
And could have a huge impact on her life.
Huge impact on her education, her career, her health, her well-being. Unwanted pregnancies have serious consequences.
Pro-choice advocates often bring up the risks of illegal abortions, too.
Right.
All the time.
They argue if you restrict access to safe and legal abortion, it won't stop abortions from happening.
Yeah.
It just means women will seek out unsafe methods, putting their lives in danger.
Exactly. Safe access to abortion is essential for women's health and safety.
Yeah.
And they also argue that the government shouldn't interfere in such a personal decision.
It should be a matter of individual conscience and freedom to make your own choices about your own life, about your own future.
So we have these two really strong arguments, each with their own perspective.
We do.
No wonder it's so polarizing.
It's very polarizing, and both sides have strengths and weaknesses.
Okay.
Pro-life has a strong moral foundation, right? Emphasizes the inherent value of human life.
Mm-hmm.
But critics say it doesn't consider the woman's perspective enough.
Her circumstances, the potential burdens of forcing her into motherhood.
Exactly. And then you look at the pro-choice side, which champions individual liberty and a woman's right to self-determination, but some question whether that fully acknowledges the moral status of the fetus, especially later in the pregnancy.
It's so complex, trying to balance the rights of the woman with the developing fetus.
Yeah, it's about where you draw the line, and a lot of that depends on your own beliefs about when life begins and how much the government should be involved in these kinds of personal decisions.
So how does this all work now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned and this power to regulate abortion goes back to the states?
It's a huge shift in the landscape. We're seeing this huge divide across the country.
How so?
Well, some states are enacting these near total bans on abortion.
Wow.
While others are going in the complete opposite direction.
Okay.
Codifying abortion rights into law and even becoming safe havens for women who are traveling from states with more restrictive laws.
So it's like two completely different realities.
It is.
Depending on where you live. And this creates new challenges for women who are seeking abortions, right?
Absolutely. Because now whether they can exercise this right depends on where they live and if they have the money to travel to a state where it's legal.
Right.
And that raises a lot of concerns about equality and fairness.
For sure. Is it really a right if only certain people have access to it?
Exactly. So the focus of the debate is changing too, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just about whether or not abortion should be legal, but how do you access it in this post-Roe world?
Exactly. The practicalities of it all.
Yeah. We're seeing this whole new wave of legal challenges and arguments. Some states are pushing this concept of fetal personhood.
Fetal personhood.
Yeah. They want to give legal rights to embryos and fetuses, which could lead to even stricter laws.
Wow. That's adding another layer to an already very complex issue. What does that even mean? Fetal personhood.
Well, basically it means granting full legal rights and protections to a fetus from the moment of conception.
So like at the very beginning.
At the very beginning, it would mean that under the law, a fetus would be considered a person.
With all the rights.
With all the rights and privileges that come with that.
Wow, that's huge. How would that change things legally with abortion?
Oh, it would have massive implications. If a fetus is considered a person, abortion could be prosecuted as murder.
Whoa.
In states that recognize fetal personhood, I mean. It would basically make abortion a crime.
Even in cases of rape or incest?
Yeah, potentially.
So these legal battles, it sounds like they're going to keep going.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to see this debated in courts across the country for years to come. And whatever happens will have a huge impact on, well, everyone. Women, families, society.
Yeah. It's a big deal. So Roe v. Wade being overturned, it really has opened up a whole world of challenges. Legal, ethical, political.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot today, like even just deciphering these legal metaphors to trying to define life and the rights of the unborn. What do you think is like the biggest takeaway from all of this?
I think for me, it's realizing that even these really long-standing legal precedents, like Roe v. Wade, they can be overturned.
Right.
It shows how much the law can change, how it's influenced by society's values and interpretations. It also, I think it shows how important it is to keep engaging in these conversations and trying to shape the laws that affect all of us.
That's a really good point. We can't just sit back and assume things will stay the same, especially when it comes to these issues that are so personal and hit on our values and beliefs.
Yeah.
This deep dive has also really shown how complex this abortion debate is.
It is.
It's not black and white. It's about fundamental rights clashing, deep beliefs, ethical dilemmas. It's a lot.
It's all of that. And I think that's why it's so important to approach this whole thing with nuance, with empathy, and a real willingness to listen to other perspectives, even if they're totally different from your own.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the arguments and demonize the other side.
Exactly. But both sides have these really deep concerns that need to be heard.
Exactly. And if we just reduce this debate to slogans or dismiss each other's arguments, it just makes the divide worse.
Exactly. We have to find a way to have these conversations. The future kind of depends on it, being able to talk to each other, even when it's hard and uncomfortable.
I agree. Well, we've only just scratched the surface today, but hopefully this deep dive has given everyone a better understanding of, all the different sides of this debate.
Yeah, the history, the legal stuff, the ethics.
It's a lot. And remember, there's always more to learn, more perspectives to think about.
Oh, yeah. This is an ongoing conversation.
It is. So stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that's a good place to end it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And until next time, keep those minds open, keep asking those tough questions, and keep trying to understand each other, even when it feels like the world is pulling us apart.